So this will be a more casual, an informal vlog of sorts, a pre-introduction, if you will, to a series of videos I've had on my mind for almost 4 years now. Although at inception, I had always intended the series to be more catered specifically towards competitive players or new competitive players that are kind of trying to transition to whatever they'd learned or mastered in public play to the competitive environment. And of course, I was doing this a lot already at the time when I thought of it because there were a lot of new players who used to do pretty well in public play that were kind of transitioning to competitive play for my team's sister team, which is where we kind of developed new players and whatnot. Of course, any notion of competitive play kind of, at least in the PC, more or less started dying pretty badly when Battlefield 1 came out with no passworded servers, with very rough and unrefined infantry gameplay. And it died almost completely when, at least in LA and North America, when Battlefield 5 came out with no passworded servers of any kind for almost 2 years, with all the other kind of problems that Battlefield 5 has had to endure. So that the idea I had kind of evolved over time, throughout these past 4 years. And instead of wanting to make a video series for a fairly niche group of players, I've kind of arrived at wanting to do a series of workshop videos for a slightly bigger audience. And of course, still, it's mostly on the PC, almost entirely on the PC. One thing I notice every time there's a new Battlefield title that comes out is, there's all these like tips and tricks videos or ways to improve your gameplay in Battlefield. And most of them, even from like more Battlefield-oriented YouTubers, but certainly not any of the general gaming channels, is that they're kind of, at least in the case of the ones that the non-Battlefield YouTubers do, they're kind of like useless or completely pointless rehashes of things that anyone with half a brain can figure out after a few hours of playing the game themselves. And even a lot of the YouTubers, at least on the PC, I feel like a lot of the content's kind of neutered down, and they don't really go in depth as much as I'd like to see them. And at least on the consoles, I actually did notice Broken Machine, who I'll link in the description, who actually does more or less exactly what I've wanted to see on the PC for a while, which is going pretty in depth at improving your mechanics, your gameplay, and yada yada yada. But I still haven't really seen it on the PC yet, and I've been kicking this version of the idea around for at least 2-3 years now, and I'm finally gonna tackle it. And hopefully I'll finally see an itch that I've wanted to see scratched on the PC for quite some time. One thing I hope that the series of videos will do is provide something for Battlefield players on the PC that haven't really been feeling like they hit their potential, or even despite playing for a while, or somewhere in the back corner of their mind they know they can do better, or they at least want to get better, and they want to stop blaming their lack of being in their early 20s or younger, or not being able to play 24/7, or just simply not being good enough, because I don't believe that's true. Sure, not everyone's going to be an ESL caliber player. In fact, in this day and age, there's literally never going to be an ESL caliber player, because no offline tournament will ever contemplate Battlefield as a thing, and certainly not on PC. But I do very much believe that a lot more people can aspire to get pretty close, and it's not necessarily just grinding thousands of hours. And I think not everyone is as limited at wherever they are at as much as they, as much as you think. Personally, currently at the age of 33, and certainly at my still fairly, hefty age of 29 during Battlefield 4, when I was, able to expose myself to most competitive settings in Battlefield. There were maybe only, there were and still are only very small handfuls of players I would have found too daunting to play against on a head-to-head basis, and certainly probably less than a dozen at most. And there's a lot more players I would comfortably say that are probably better than me, but I wouldn't have shied away from going up against any of them. And the thing is, I wasn't always at this confident level of play. In fact, until in my mid to later 20s, I was barely above average, maybe somewhat barely above average, but not much more than that. Every other player that was in the top of the leaderboards in any given round kind of seemed like a hacker or someone just way out of the league to me. I always found shooters to be very daunting and intimidating. And, I've been playing Battlefield games since probably Battlefield 2. And even before that, I was probably playing a lot of Counter-Strike. But I always chalked off first-person shooters as something you just have to be talented for or have to be really young for. And I always just figured it was out of reach. And then certain things kind of started to click for me, I guess, around a little bit around Bad Company 2. And it's still, then, at best, I was like maybe 1.5 KD player, at least on average. I'd hit the top of the leaderboards occasionally, but I never really saw myself breaking past that point. And then somehow, I guess just through the sheer amount of hours I started committing to the series, I started to break past one skill plateau after another. Plateau when you kind of like start to peter off in terms of making notable improvements. But I started breaking over one after the other, and by the time I started getting into competitive play, kind of in my later 20s, I also had the very good fortune of running into probably some of the best players I could have run into. And, I was lucky enough to have them like kind of coach me or mentor me as I started to really transition into the competitive scene, which I came pretty late to, but still had the pretty good fortune of still being able to transition into before it, died out completely when BF1 came out. And, if all the things I know now, or I knew when I really started to hit my stride, if I'd known them or if I had someone, teach them to me earlier, I think I probably would have saved a whole lot of time, and that's something I hope that these videos will provide. I probably won't be catering to the largest audience, certainly not in this day and age, and certainly not for Battlefield 5 and on the PC. But, I'm not exactly aspiring to start a YouTube career. And I'm just going to be making these because just for helping maybe 1 or 5, or hopefully if I'm being ambitious, maybe even a couple dozen people. I'm going to be opinionated and subjective about, teaching stuff as much as I used to be when I used to coach people individually, back when competitive Battlefield was a thing. And just as people that coached me and helped me a lot when I was, learning things. And, well, most of my audience, people watching right now, probably, you guys probably aren't really in need of what a lot of these videos will have to offer. But, if you guys were able to, maybe willing to pass it around or recommend it to, other people they know who might, need him or need to see him, and I really appreciate it, and honestly, at the end of the day, if I just help one person, that'll be worth it. Really. Like if I can help someone, 1, maybe 5 people, it make it worth my while. And it would actually make the last 4 years that I've more or less completely wasted on the pursuit of highest level of play in Battlefield 1 and 5, it would make it sting less, and maybe even worth it. Well, kind of. But it would certainly make it sting less. And that's, I guess, something I want to leave behind. So please do subscribe and click that bell thingy and set it to all. So whenever I do post something, you see it. I'll stop posting lazy uploads of just singular rounds without any commentary. And yeah, I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.